This is Quantum of Solace. We're here on Xbox 360. Be sure to like the video. Subscribing is great as well. What are we getting here? It's 720p, 30 FPS. And yeah, this kind of uses the COD 4 engine technology, which is really interesting. And it kind of doesn't really use the strengths of it, if that makes sense. Do 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 do. So anyways, yeah, you are playing as James Bond, obviously. And this was a tie-in game to the movie Quantum of Solace, but it also leans heavily on essentially the story beats of Casino Royale, which is kind of weird. So yeah, it's very odd because it's like they're missing large chunks of Quantum of Solace, the movie. And I don't know if the movie had the most exciting action set pieces that they could have used, but it feels very odd because it's like literally a lot of the narrative of that movie just all of a sudden is like swept away, and you're basically doing like the ending sequence of, you know, Casino Royale. So very, very strange in that regard. It's still somewhat of an alright Bond game. You know, it's got varied levels, you go and you shoot stuff, but I think out of, like, kind of the various Activision efforts of the Daniel Craig era, this is one of the weaker ones, I would say. It's just kind of like, it's alright, like, it's not really anything special. It is interesting because you can kind of, like, you cover in third person, do stuff in third person, but it's like a first person game. So it is honestly just really strange, and then you got these dynamic sort of like basically executions, I guess. But yeah, and then there's big set pieces with explosions, and it very much like when you play it and you kind of take it in, it's certainly like an aged game. It hasn't aged the best. It still has fun moments of, you know, action and explosions and whatnot, but like it isn't really anything too wild. I guess if you were a big Quantum of Solace fan, you'd be like, oh, you know, kind of neat, but even then, a lot of, if not almost all of the story of Quantum of Solace is literally non-existent in this one. It's just kind of like swept aside, which is, I think, a little disappointing. Collectibles-wise, there's like these cell phones that you kind of pick up. Do we just not need to blow that guy up, but we just... Were you trying to blow up the helicopter? I don't know. Anyways, doesn't matter. So that's the thing in this one, too. There was also the multiplayer, which is something I actually played a lot of, believe it or not. I got the achievement for killing over like 1,000 people. I guess I really liked the multiplayer back in the day. At least I had played a lot of it at launch. It was actually really cool to revisit this one, because between my achievements it had been 15 years, so that is a gap in time, obviously. Like, that is a substantial gap in time of my life. So that is utterly wild to think about. But yeah, anyways, kind of an intriguing title from the perspective of, like, the levels. Like, there is a good variety of levels, but, like, at the same time, I wasn't really blown away by it. There's different difficulty options, too, which is kind of just a thing for Bonds, and, you know, you've got Daniel Craig here doing his take on Bond and stuff like that. It's just kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. It's okay. It's an alright shooter. I actually, you know, I don't really... I don't know if I really recall the multiplayer all too well, considering it's been so long. But yeah, like I said, I do remember fondly being like, oh, playing a ton of this. Because I think I, like, rented this game or something back in the day. But I obviously played, like, you know, a good share of this if I was able to get, like, 1,000 kills in multiplayer. I would say that I've put my fair share of time into it. But, yeah, it's just kind of like your run-of-the-mill kind of shooter. There's some stealth stuff you can optionally do in some of the levels. I wouldn't say it's, like, the most perfectly sort of like polished kind of like shooter and stuff, but like, you know, it works. You go through stuff, you destroy things, you shoot enemies. There's like environmental stuff, like you can break like switches and stuff, and you can hack into like these cameras in order to get like vantages on others. It's an interesting title from that perspective too. It's kind of cool, and it does go through some neat story beats, but the story itself, I really do think is kind of like completely nonsensical in this one. I know that's a weird thing to say, like it kind of creates its own story, but it kind of feels like it was almost apparent that they didn't, like the developers didn't have a full grasp on like what the actual narrative of Quantum of Solace was going to be, because there's so many like it just kind of skips along. Like what the female lead for Quantum of Solace, she's like just there suddenly at one point, and you don't really know the character. Like if you haven't watched the movie, you have no idea who she is or what she's doing, and then all of a sudden she's just kind of there. Same with a lot of the characters too, is like things just kind of happen. I know where I'm supposed to go. I'm just kind of exploring and showing it off a little bit more. But yeah, it's really, really weird from a story perspective, because I'm just kind of like, if you play this and you're like, oh, okay, well, I know the movie, it's like you would have no idea about the movie Quantum of Solace, because it doesn't really it doesn't deliver that story here. Like, you don't know the characters, the big motivations are gone. Like, you're essentially just cutting out like vastly important parts of the storytelling. And to me, it's so strange that is the case. I kind of like, I'm sitting, you know, playing through it, and I'm just like, you know, what is going on? And it's very, very weird. Like I said, like if you were like, okay, I want a good recap of the movie, oh, I'll play the game. You literally just wouldn't get that from this. And to me, that is like bizarre, because the movie tie-ins, like they go beyond the films, or they capture the films in a game. You know, maybe extended, but this one is just kind of like, remember Casino Royale? And it's like, okay, and they only do part of Casino Royale, and it's a very confusing and strange game from a narrative standpoint. It literally, I don't think the narrative even makes any sense. Like, if you've played Quantum of Solace, I think, or if you've watched Quantum of Solace, you know, this does kind of like add some extra stuff to that, and you're like, okay, you know, that expands the lore, I guess you would say, of it. So from that perspective, you know, that's totally fine, but from like a perspective of someone coming in fresh and wanting to get the gist of it, this is literally probably like an ultimately confusing thing. You'd be like, what is going on here? And then like those pre-rendered cinematics are just really, really quite bad. They really are just like not very good. Oh, it's loading. Just kind of waiting for it to load, and I could just skip into the action. There we go. So yeah, story-wise, I really don't get this one. It's just weird. Gameplay-wise, it's like, it's so-so. You just kind of go and you shoot a bunch of stuff, and then, you know, that's sort of the end of it. You almost miss out on some of the cooler parts of, like, I would say the Quantum of Solace sort of story, if that makes sense, because it does have some interesting set pieces, but like the middle of the movie is just missing entirely, alongside all of the actual key plot development points. It's kind of like they just went to Treyarch and they're like, here's like the big set pieces, or here's a couple things that happen, you know, make a game out of that. And to me, that's like, it just functionally doesn't really work. It's really, really weird. But it's still, you know, it's got all those like big Call of Duty kind of like over the top moments, explosions, action, set things, and you're like, ooh. But it feels like they kind of liked Casino Royale, and they didn't really like Quantum of Solace at all, and that's kind of what they put together. So either they weren't given the material they needed to actually, like, make this work, or they didn't like Quantum of Solace at all, is kind of the vibes I got, you know, kind of playing this. And that in itself is just weird, because it's, you know, it's a Bond film. It's like a serviceable Bond film. I feel like they could have done something a little bit more with it to actually capture the spirit of the narrative. Like, I was literally sitting there at the end of the game, and I was like, I don't think they actually at all covered the theme of Quantum of Solace, like what the actual, you know, what the motivation of, like, the character was. It was just kind of like, you're like, okay, bad guy here, go deal with this bad guy. Okay, bad guy there, go deal with this bad guy. And it doesn't really describe or showcase or present as, like, why Bond is doing anything he's doing. It just doesn't make any sense at all. Storytelling-wise, I was like, the narrative was so confusing to me, and I was like, because honestly, I did need a bit of a refresher. It's been so long since, you know, Quantum of Solace. It's been so long even since, like, the Daniel Craig era at this point, where it's kind of like, it would have been nice to have a good refresh that actually presented it well, and then I just kind of sitting here being like, okay, I'm just walking through rooms, shooting guys. Like, at least the cover system in that is kind of neat, and they've got some different things you're doing, but yeah, it was just kind of a bland alright shooter, I guess. Yeah, and then the Batman moment with the Batcave here. Very, very strange, this game. But yeah, I remember the multiplayer being cool. It seemed like you could still search for multiplayer matches, which I thought was fascinating, but there wasn't really anything to come across. So that's a little disappointing. If you were wanting to do some online stuff, I guess you could set that up with others, perhaps. But yeah, like, look how terrible that looks. Anyways, let's get right into the action. So if you're just going from, like, set piece to set piece shooting stuff, it's like, okay, whatever. I will give it to the AI. Their grenades and their usage of cover is actually not too bad. But yeah, this is, I don't know if this is the best of Bond games. Like, we don't have a lot of Bond titles in the modern era. You know what I mean? We don't have a lot of James Bond these days. You know, you used to have, when I was younger, we had, like, Bond games constantly. Like, there was multiple studios making different Bond titles, and we had all of these choices. And then it was just kind of like, at a certain point, it was just kind of Activision doing these, and it was hit or miss. It really was, and I think this one was more of a miss than kind of anything. It's just, it really is kind of bizarre at times. And then there's, like, QuickTime events and other kind of stuff. It's just really, really bizarre. And I don't know whose fault it is. I really don't, because it's like, you know, they're obviously using good tech behind this game for its time. And then it's like, you know, the end result is just kind of like, okay, you're Bond, you go shoot some guys, and that's kind of it. No substance there, which I think kind of defeats the, again, like, thematically of what Quantum of Solace was trying to be commentary-wise on stuff. And I don't even know if that movie really knows what it's doing either. I don't know if I'd ever want to watch that one again, I suppose. It's just kind of, so-so. But yeah, I'd say this game just really doesn't do that kind of stuff. It is kind of cool to do the Casino Royale segments, I guess. You know, if you're a Casino Royale fan. But even then, it doesn't really do, like, it does, like, extra kind of levels on Casino Royale. It doesn't really, like, it follows a little bit of the plot, too. It's just this weird, like, mismatch of, like, storytelling and stuff, and then incredibly linear. Obviously, you're just going from, like, piece to piece to piece, killing stuff, and then, you know, eventually it kind of just ends. Which I guess is fine, I don't know, I was just sort of hoping for something of a little bit more substance and depth when it comes to, you know, games, even older games of the time. But, yeah, they just kind of, like, I mean, it's a movie tie-in game, too, right? It's gonna be, like, your mileage is gonna vary greatly, depending on the property and everything like that. Okay, I jumped back down. I got knocked down, and I got up again. At least the clouds kind of move, I guess. I mean, the skyline looks kind of like bland, but you know, at least the clouds kind of move. What an oddity of a title. I really am just kind of like, this is very, very strange. And the resolution quality and stuff like that is, you know, really quite poor and is very, very jaggedy around the edges, which is, you know, it's of its era, right? So I guess I just really didn't expect, yeah, there'd be so many sacrifices in regards to, like, quality and everything. And it doesn't even, like, get the big moments right, too. Like, this sequence is actually, I think this part of the game is actually pretty dead on. But, like, you know, like, the ending and some of the big moments, too. Like, I don't even think you would really know, you know, wrapping back to, like, story. I don't think you'd even really be able to follow the plot at all. You'd basically... You're just kind of like Bond going around just killing these targets, like Dominic. I don't even think it really describes what Dominic Green's like motives are, what's he doing, you know, what the goals are, what any of the character goals are. And it just kind of like throws away the villains. You're just sort of there as Bond doing stuff, and then it's, yeah, it's strange. You'd also almost still think of like. Because the way it handles Vesper, too, almost feels like she'd be a bit of a just straight-up, like, random turncoat kind of villain. It doesn't really dive into that at all. You almost really have to have watched the movies to have any practical understanding or concept of, like, what they're going for in this particular title. And then there's, like, the weird random, like, turning off, I guess you would say, the security cameras and stuff like that. So we're going to save and quit and go to a different level because that music on that one is a bit questionable, needless to say. It does load decently fast. I will say that. It definitely does load decently fast. It's another one of those ones, though, where it's like you turn off the music and it's still like... music is playing, which is so weird. Let's go to the Casino Royale. Yeah, let's do that. Kind of show that off there, but it's got like the, you know, just so much like confluence, right? Like the way the cinematics are kind of done, the way the loading's done, the way the levels are designed. It just kind of like James Bondifies it, which makes sense. Like it works too, but yeah.
This is a waste of time. I have no interest.
Bit of a strange situation. So you might find this one to be intriguing. I don't know. It has, like, its moments, but it just, like, it sort of felt like just a shooter where I was going around just blasting people, and then, you know, eventually it kind of just ended. Which is fine, you know. That's okay, too. I'm not... totally bothered by that.
Who was this? Follow my lead.
I think they know something's up. Da-da, da-da. I think that's the first time I died in this, doing this video review on this one too, which is fine. But yeah, you are supposed to like use stealth, and you know they don't notice you, and you walk by, and then you shimmy on the thing and go do the stuff, and yeah, these moments were weird too, where it's like these camera angles of like, get like these weird split camera angles, and it just looks kind of terrible. I was like, why is it doing this? Like it's very obviously like scripted segments, and I guess the idea is you're supposed to be like James Bond doing all the stealth and the secret agent stuff. I don't know. I wonder if that counts as being like detected if you execute someone. I do kind of ponder that actually. Because then you can restart from last checkpoint. That is like a good question. Yeah, I wonder if that counts. Because I was trying to do the achievement when I first did this for getting into the showers without getting noticed. But then I'm sitting there thinking, I was like, maybe when I do like the rush executions on guys instead of just shooting them, that's when you get spotted. I don't know. Anyways, Quantum of Solace. What a weird setup this one is.